Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this informational night on school board candidacy. Our goal this evening is to talk about servant leadership and a bit about board commitment and leadership. So I want to first begin by introducing some of our board members that have joined us for tonight. We have Mrs. Angie Smith, who is our board secretary. We have Mr. Zach Rich, who is our board treasurer. We have Mr. Richard Muckamal, who is our board trustee. We have Mrs. Terry Weems, who is also a board trustee. And I don't think I'm seeing anybody else. We may have some people coming in and out. Our purpose and goal tonight was to give you as much information as we can about what is board service, how do you begin the process of applying if you're interested in running for the election. We do have 3 seats that will be up for this election in November. So we're going to start right in, and then we'll have a chance for questions and answers at the end. I also want to point out that when the invite for tonight was put out, there's also a link on there that Mr. Rich will talk about during his presentation. So moving forward, we're going to start with the election process and tips with Mr. Rich.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So thank you all so much for showing up tonight virtually. I know we'd planned to do this live, but with the circumstances as they are, thank you all so much for showing up tonight. A big part of running for office is knowing what to do to actually be running for office. And so I wanted to take just a moment here to go over a couple things for everyone here. The first thing is, as Ms. Green mentioned, a big chunk of this is information that is available on the Oakland County Clerk's website. And so that is oakgov.com/clerkrod. So that's clerk, ROD. /elections. And from there, you are able to get a lot of information that's available, from filing deadlines to the paperwork you need to apply. So first thing first is, when applying, there's actually a thing that says there's a link for requirements on the clerk's website. And then there's actually a spot for local school board members. So first thing first, in order to file, everything needs to be done with the Oakland County Elections Division. They are at 1200 North Telegraph Road in Pontiac. And so that is where you submit your paperwork, where you get a lot of your paperwork as well. And so what you are able to do is you need an affidavit of identity and receipt of filing. That is the first part. So the affidavit essentially states on the form who you are, what you're running for, things like that. And then you get a receipt of filing to be running for office. Now, there are 2 different ways to file. There are 2 different ways to do that. First is the nominating petitions and the filing fees. So in districts with over 10,000 people, you are required to have a minimum of 40 signatures, a maximum of 100 from qualified and registered electors of the school district, or you are able to pay a $100 non-refundable filing fee. And so that is mentioned in the paperwork as well. I would say check with the clerk on the number of signatures, as there have been legal changes by the legislature and court cases in the recent month. And so with that, you need to file. Here's an important thing. The last day to file to be a candidate for school board is 4 p.m. on Tuesday, July 21st. Once again, Tuesday, July 21st at 4 p.m. is the last time to file. And then just a little bit later, on Friday, the 24th at 4 p.m. is the last day to withdraw if you decide it's not for you. But that is down the line and something to think about and just have in the back of your mind to be on the ballot. Now, a next part that you need to know is establishing an election committee, and they have paperwork available for how to do that uh, under campaign finance requirements on the Oakland County website. So there is a form called candidate committees that you're able to fill out. And I would say the biggest thing that I can say to you, the most important, is feel free to check with the clerk's office elections division. They are the essentially, in this case, the end all be all on this. So if they say one thing, you should follow what they are saying. If you have questions, give them a call. That is what they are there for. They have an entire division to answer those questions and to help you get through this process. Running for office is hard enough as it is without having to jump through all the extra hoops of not knowing paperwork and things like that. So it's always good to check with the experts there. A couple other things is just to make sure on any campaign literature that you are printing to or that you have out, make sure that you have a paid for by uh, and then having your committee name. That is extremely important as you don't want to be fined for campaign finance violations. You should also be sure to make sure that you are submitting your paperwork and keeping records of all financials throughout the campaign. Now, that's not only what you're bringing in and spending, but also say someone does something for your campaign. It says, I will take care of the food for this event when when we finally are able to open back up and people can see each other again. And so you're having an event and someone says that they will pay for the food for your event. That is called an in-kind donation. And yes, you do need to track that. And so there is paperwork to file with that as well. And my piece of advice on that is make sure that you're keeping track along the way so that at the end of the campaign, you aren't trying to bring everything together at the last second, especially as there is a pre election filing. And so you want to make sure that you aren't running for office, having to do all the paperwork, get all that together, check all your receipts at the same time. You want to be focused on running for office. So with that, my final thing is if you're doing printing things, my encouragement is that you use a union shop. There are many ways to find them in the area, and making sure to have a union bug on the things that you are getting printed. If anyone has any questions, I'm not sure if you're able to ask them now or if we're asking to hold those until the end. Unfortunately, I do have to leave early, so if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You are always more than welcome. You can either send me an email or give me a call on my cell, 248 320 7934. This is an intense process. I know people who, it's a scary thing to do, but thank you all so much for taking this first step, showing up to this meeting tonight. And I want to be able to help make this a little bit less scary for you. And thank you all so much for your commitment to our district. Have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Thank you.
Ms. Green,
Yes, Mrs. Smith.
I think Mr. Rich forgot to mention, have a separate account. Don't put it into your personal account. You need to have your own account, you know, committee to elect. So if you go through the credit union, you go through the bank, you want to have a separate account. You do not want to put that into the funds that you're getting, go into your personal account. And you also have to be 18, registered voter, and live in the city of Farmington Hills.
So you need to live within the school district.
That's correct too.
Farmington Hills, that neighborhood in West Bloomfield. We also, as Ms. Smith said, having that separate campaign account is extremely important. And so you are able to you need to have that for your committee, and there is proper paperwork to file for that as well, which is also available on the clerk's website.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that addition, Ms. Smith.
And thank you for reminding them about West Bloomfield, because a lot of people don't know that we have West Bloomfield too.
And thank you so much. And as Mr. Rich said, if you have more questions, please feel to be able to reach out to any of us, and we'll help you through the process. Because it can be daunting at times, so we're more than happy to help you anywhere along the line. So, moving to our next section, we're going to talk about roles and responsibilities of a Board of Education member. And tonight, that portion will be presented by Mr. Muckamel. Mr. Muckamel.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So in the next few minutes, I'd like to briefly touch on 4 topic areas. First, I'll cover the basic areas of responsibility that all school boards are required to do. And here we're also going to make the distinction between leadership and management. And we will cover the role of an individual trustee and some of the knowledge that you'd be required to learn. And finally, I want to share with you what I think are the traits of an effective school board trustee. The role of a school board is one of governance and leadership. Since my appointment, I've noticed that people are easily confused about the difference between leadership and management. So here's a definition of the two that I've found useful over the years. Leadership is about doing the right thing, and management is about doing it right. So as leaders in the district, we focus on the big picture. What is our mission as a district, and what is our vision of how we should instruct our students? What is the profile of a successful graduate of Farmington Public Schools? Are we aligning our resources to be consistent with this? And do our policies align with it? The management of the district occurs from the superintendent and other administrators. They make sure that we have the correct systems, processes, and procedures in place to achieve the results that we as leaders expect. So as leaders then, our work is divided into 4 distinct areas. First, we hire, oversee, and evaluate the performance of the board's one and only employee, the superintendent. It is not the board's job to manage the district or any other employee, even the assistant superintendents. That's the job of the superintendent. Second, we review and approve the district's budget. Third, we review and approve the district's plan for curriculum and instruction. And finally, it's our job to have an agreement on the vision for the district and to ensure that we have policies in place that are consistent with that vision. So there's a big difference between being on the school board and other volunteer work that you may have done in the past. As personally rewarding as this is, you must always remember that you will be a publicly elected official who swears an oath to follow the constitutions of the US and Michigan and to follow the law writ large. Our day-to-day work is primarily subject to state laws that govern the operation of the school district, the Open Meetings Act, the Freedom of Information Act, and even the US Constitution in our board meetings, particularly as it pertains to the First Amendment. So in a nutshell, we serve as a liaison between the community and the district. And finally, we act as an advocate for public education and encourage public support for the school district. While a school board trustee only has legal authority as part of the school board as a whole, and only during board meetings, most of our time and energy is spent in our unofficial work. The leadership team of the district starts with the school board and the superintendent working together and hopefully collaboratively. Clearly, our ability individually and as a school board to provide a clear and consistent leadership direction to the superintendent is essential. As difficult as this might be for us from time to time, we should avoid intruding in the day-to-day operations of the district. this can't be stated enough. It is not our job to run the district. We do not need to know every detail of what's going on in the district. It is our job to agree as a board on a vision for the district and see to it that the superintendent is following it. And if we are to be a well-functioning board, we should work collaboratively as a trustee with our other school board trustees to make decisions that are ultimately in the best interest of the district, all of its students, parents, and teachers. So what are we expected to know and what are we expected to do? Well, trustees are expected to be knowledgeable on major school district issues and be prepared for meetings. We don't need to be experts on every detail, but we do need to have a working knowledge on these issues so that we can make informed decisions. Taking courses offered by the Michigan Association of School Boards is an important way of getting up to speed quickly. We are expected to be familiar with laws governing our behavior on a regular basis, such as the Open Meetings Act, for example. And obviously, attending school board meetings, committee meetings, and meetings on which you serve as a representative are an important job as well of the trustee. And personally, I think it's also important to respect and follow the chain of command in communication, the role of school board officers, and actually the limits of our role as school board trustees as well. People are going to notice how we comport ourselves when we're in school board meetings and even when we're not. And trust me, they will be outspoken in critique of us as a board and even on an individual level, especially if we're dealing with potentially controversial issues. I personally think that it's important to lead by example. There is a code of ethics for school board members, and I think it's important that we read it and follow it. And it's important for us to show our support for the district by being visible at public and school events. People do notice this. And finally, it's important for each of us to vote at school board meetings. As school board members, we only act together as a board. And the most important duty we have is to make decisions as expressed through our vote. School board trustees should not abstain on votes before the board unless there is a clear conflict of interest, which should be stated publicly. As I mentioned a minute ago, we can only act as a board, and we only have authority in school board meetings. We have no official duties or authorities on our own. And I just want to close my comments by sharing my own observations about some of the inside game of school board service. I've spoken with several board members in other districts, and we seem to have some common problems. It's easy for school boards to be dysfunctional, and it can be difficult to get back on track. Probably the biggest cause of dysfunction is a lack of trust between board members or between the board and the superintendent. We can't control anybody's behavior except our own. And trust is something that's very difficult to achieve, and it can be lost in an instant. The best way to build trust, in my view, is to act with integrity, honesty, and humility. Check your ego at the door and don't take things personally. This is a team sport, and each of us has a position to play on the team. Being in the public eye, you're going to be subject to sometimes brutal criticism from the public, either at meetings or on social media. Learn to ignore it. And have a great work ethic. As you're going to hear next, school board service is time consuming. It's important to read pre-meeting material, to be prepared for board meetings, to take courses such as those offered by the Michigan Association of School Boards, and to be prepared to attend events, conferences, and courses at night and on weekends. And be fair and objective. if you're the parent of students in the district, it's important to remember that school board service trumps any other volunteer activity, and that you need to act in the interest of our 9,400 plus students and 1,000 staff. And have a strong moral center. At the end of the day, there are no consequences for the failure of a board member to adhere to any of the points that I've talked about. After all, you can't be fired except by the voters. So for me, integrity, honesty, and humility will go a long way to being successful. And despite the fact that it's largely a thankless job, I find that the internal rewards are great. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mukamal. Our next presentation portion will be on board commitment with Mrs. Smith.
Thank you. I know this is a lot to take in, and it can be intimidating. So, and this is not a board meeting, so I would prefer to be called Angie. This is a lot to take in, and hopefully this will not make you change your mind. I ran in 2016 along with Ms. Weems, and Ms. Weems and I, which is on this call, are the senior board members. And then my other colleagues are not the senior board members, but they have taken their courses that have put them in situations where they're certified board members. Mr. Mukamal covered quite a bit of what I'm supposed to be speaking on, but I'm gonna add to it. Our board meetings. Most districts do not have 2 board meetings. Some districts, because I'm also on Oakland School Board of Directors, I have gone to different districts and they have maybe 1 meeting per month. We just happen to have 2. We can have more, and if we have more, we have to have a consensus of having more than 1, and it has to be approved within a certain amount of time, hopefully within 48 hours, so that we don't break the Open Meetings Act violation. All of our meetings must be posted for the public so that they can know, so that it doesn't look like you're not being transparent and you're hiding something. More than 1 board member, well, more than 4 board members, then you have a quorum when there's time to have discussion. So when you have your board meetings, unless there is an emergency, we must all have those meetings posted. Those are usually posted by Ms. Bauman and the CO office. Workshops. Workshops are geared to help us get our education. After you're elected, which I don't think anybody touch bases on this, right after you're elected for this position, you will get a call from your superintendent congratulating you, and you'll get a call from Ms. Buckley congratulating you and letting you know you are going right into being trained. Those classes are through Michigan School Board Association. They're not workshops, but it's to get your CPA so that you can, when you become a doctor or anything, you take classes. When I've always said before, as a elected official or even as a pilot, when you want to fly that plane, you want to take those lessons and those classes. So those classes are available. So your workshops that we have can be done by the board president or by the superintendent. Are those mandatory? No. Are your classes mandatory? No. For each class that you take, you get a credit. That's how you get your certification. Workshops, retreats, and board meetings, you get a stipend. We don't get paid. Many people think that we get this big paycheck, but we only get, how much can I say, Ms. Green and Mr. Mukamal and Ms. Weems? We only get what? $30 a meeting. So there's no big pay. No one pays your house note, your car note. That's it. So, and those checks will come, that stipend will come at the end of the school year, and we will receive that July, the first week of July. Um, I touch bases on MASB training. MASB is Michigan School Board Association. You will get, you won't be left out here alone. You have a mentor as a senior board member that will mentor you. Make sure all the time that you get a call. I just happen to be fortunate to have Ms. Weems call me at least once or twice out of the week if I had any questions or needed anything. Was I okay? Was I ready for the next meeting? MASB, which is Oakland School Board, Michigan School Board Association, will also help you. And if you need help, you can, and they're 24 hours. You can also call Oakland schools and someone will talk to you at no charge. The next thing is board representation. Um, we have board officers. So you have our president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And our treasurer is usually our legislative person. So what that means is we have board reps. So we are assigned by the president after the new president has been put into place what we will be reps on. So we have everybody knows of Farmington African American Parent Network, which is FAPN. You will be assigned there as a rep, or we have our PTA council. You will be a rep there. There's other committees, representations for different committees are totally different from being on committees. So your representation is if you're out doing the work in the district to go and hear, not to tell what to do. You are there to come back and report to the board during our board meetings. So back to board meetings. As the secretary, as you know, I go in and I come in maybe 5 or 10 minutes early to be ready for my meetings so that I have everything set up. I have anything that the president gives me. We collaboratively work together to find out when or if we're going to have a group of people for whatever is on the agenda, and we're ready to figure out how many comments we will probably have and how we will time those. Public comment. Public comment is comments, not questions. So I know a lot of people look and say, why do they look so, like they're not concerned or whatever and involved? Because we cannot comment. We are not speaking as a board, and this is not a meeting. It's just like if you see your city council meetings, your state legislative meetings, your senators meetings, or even your city, like I said, your city council meetings. Your board president will assign you, as I stated, for being a representative on these committees. So we have committees such as HR, building and finance. Those committees only will hold 3 board members. Anything more than 3, if you have 4, that's a quorum. We are to come back and we report to our board as a whole. And what I do is I send the information out when my meetings are going to take place. And if there's questions for those members that are not on that committee, is to come back and take it to whoever is running that meeting at that time. Then I will come back and give the questions and answers that we received, and then we bring them back to the board as a whole. That's how you can be transparent. Representation. When you go to different events, you come back. That's another thing that you come back and you report, not only to the board president and to the superintendent, but you bring it back to the whole board. You want your board to know what's going on. As far as officers, I am a staunch protocol person. So if the president cannot attend an event, or if the vice president does not attend the event, your next person that is if that person is there, if it's the secretary or the treasurer, it is the secretary or the treasurer's job to speak at that event. But you must ask the president first what if he or she minds, if or ask, is there anything that the officers are supposed to have. 9 times out of 10, if there's a comment or speech that needs to be made, the president comes. If he or she cannot make it, the next person that is available can. And you speak. That's the only time you can speak on the behalf of the board. Other than that, you individually cannot speak on the behalf of the board. So if you're on Facebook or whatever, you can't go on and say, on the behalf of the school board, I say this. You are one vote and one vote only. The next item we were on is length of office. I happen to run for the office of 6-year term. There are some people may come on. Well, I don't know if Mr. Mukamal will be coming on when he runs for 6 years or for the 4-year term. I ran for the 6-year term. So you have a 6-year term and you may have a 4-year term. It depends on what seat you're running for. So you finish out that term. I also am on Oakland School Board of Directors, which I was appointed. Then I had to run to retain that seat. With me running to retain that seat, my term is up in 2022. So that's the length of office. Those are your terms, 6-year, and that's pretty much it. Our average hours per week, it depends on the individual. I happen to have made this a career. I work 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. The reason being is I want to be a dedicated, a committed board member, and that's what the public put me in for. So with that being said, you will see me at school events, school functions. When we do read our board packet, which we get a board packet every Thursday, that packet will have dates in there. And that's your communique. And then we have the board packet. That board packet can run from 20 pages to 200 pages. So those are the questions that we bring. We go to our superintendent. We talk to our board. We work collaboratively and talk amongst each other, figure out what's going on. And if we've got questions, we take those questions and turn those questions in just before the board meeting so that those questions can be answered by whoever the chair is or by the person that's presenting, such as like Ms. Kaminsky or Ms. Bauman, if they have something. So they'll be ready to answer those questions instead of, the time, not so much being wasted, but if they have the time and the questions in advance, they won't have to go back, especially if we have to vote on something. So if you go to an event, which I am 24 hours, 7 days a week, pretty much. When I go to an event such as a play or something of that nature, I let our administrative assistant, Ms. Buckley, know. And when she finds out that I'm going, she will let the schools know in advance. Sometimes you'll have different schools that will acknowledge that you have been there. And you may get up and they may ask you to speak, or they just want to give you a little shout out. You get up and wave. Then that's how we covered that. Like I said, my average time of doing this, I do it full time. I've made this a career so that I can be available for anyone that has any questions. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you. So our next topic, and some of these have been touched upon, but I'll elaborate just a little bit, is Board of Education communication. So there are a multitude of ways in which we receive communication. A primary way, so we're prepared for our meetings, is called Board Book. And I know Angie mentioned that. Board book comes to us on Thursday, sometime during the day, from Mrs. Buckley, who is our administrative assistant. In that board book, we get our agendas, we get all of the documents that we need to read through, including financial or proposals or other types of things. We also get all of the board communications again, and through letters or emails that we've received come back in that board book as well. Board book can range from 50 pages to 400 pages, depending on the amount of information that we need to be looking through. We are asked as a Board of Education to please read the entire packet and submit any questions or concerns that we have by 12 o'clock on that following Monday, giving the administration an opportunity to answer any questions, clarify anything, or in some cases, remove a topic that we feel that we're not quite prepared to address at that time. Another method of communication is called the communique, that is also put out by Mrs. Buckley to the board every week, including the weeks we do not have a board meeting. In that communique, we receive updates and questions that we've had from the board with responses from anyone within the system. We also get relevant articles that we need to read. We get a weekly update on what the superintendent's meetings and work schedule has looked like, who he's been communicating with. We get any communications that have been received to the Board of Education that we may need to respond to. And as Mrs. Smith alluded to, we also get a calendar with all the updated and upcoming events, times, locations, so that the board is aware of all of the types of things happening in our system, so we're able to determine what is priority and what we can attend based on our schedules. We also have something that was started under our previous administration. It's called like the Friday Spotlight or Update. This isn't happening right now, obviously, as our students aren't in school, but it is ran by many of our students in the TV10 room, where they will meet with Dr. Herrera and they will have a topic, and Dr. Herrera has transformed that into really talking key leaders in our district, in our community, such as our police chief, our PTA council president. So it's an informative opportunity of what's happening in our district, and it allows our entire community to keep abreast of those topics in our school system. As a board member, we receive a multitude of emails. It may be emails from one another. It may be emails from MASC. It may be from Oakland County School Board Association. It may be from Dr. Herrera, or it may even be from the many stakeholders that we serve within our community. So emails are sent to us in their entirety, included in our packet. It is the responsibility of the board president to acknowledge receipt as appropriate, or ensure that it has been referred to the appropriate central office person to respond if that is most appropriate. As we've worked into our chain of communication with Dr. Herrera's leadership, he's been really helpful in mainstreaming communication so that you as a person writing into the board is able to go to the closest person who's going to get you back the answer you're looking for or the information you're looking for, versus having to call 3 or 4 people to get the information you need. We also get phone calls and text, and it is a responsibility that we have within each other to return those in a timely manner. We also, as you know, receive public comments during our board meetings, and Angie already talked about our obligations to public comments is to be listeners at that time, processing that information, and then as appropriate following those meetings, some of those need to be addressed through our central office staff or administration. And sometimes it is just simply that we are listening, and those things may come up in our board committees as appropriate as well. I already referenced our chain of communication. That's been a real helpful tool this year as we work to streamline the process of communication. And as I said, work to be more effective, that communication is directly with the people who can get you the response or answers in a timely manner. Meetings with the superintendent. The Board of Education meets with our superintendent from time to time on an individual basis. Dr. Herrera's approach is that he likes to meet with each board member individually. He is going to start some peerings so that it is much more effective of his time as well, and sharing communication so that all of the board members are informed about any information that is important for them to know. In addition, the board president and often the board vice president will meet bi-weekly with the superintendent to set the agenda and review the agenda for the prior coming meeting. Also, we receive a lot of communication from our administrative assistant as she clarifies items, makes sure we know about opportunities for board growth or and the invitations from community members, RSVPing, and she's extremely helpful with working with us as a board to ensure that our needs are met as we communicate. Something new, Dr. Harris started since we've been working with COVID and our new virtual platform is we get what's called board briefs, and those are given to us through our communique every other week, which talks about all of the task teams that are working, from our curriculum instruction team to our finance team to our food service team to our equity team. So all of those teams give a report to the board of what they have been working on, what their goals are, and so we can follow along. Those board briefs then are turned into a community communication once a month, so that information is shared out with the entire community as well, so that you can follow along with the progress of the board, the district, and where our goals are. So as you can see, there's a multitude of communications that come through, and it's can be overwhelming at times, but we've got a pretty good system to ensure that we get well communicated in a timely manner. So I think we're going to move now to the portion of questions and answers. I would have loved to have you each introduce yourself, but I know even with this platform, some of you are showing as just a caller, so I'm not able to call you by name to have you introduce yourselves. But we do as a board really appreciate your interest in being here this evening, and we want to be able to be helpful in this process. And so one thing I do want to just quickly mention off of the filing process, one thing that you're going to find is, as Angie talked about, you're going to be opening a bank account for your committee. You will also find that something that's a piece of helpful information is some banks require you to have an EIN number, which is through the federal government. Some banks do not require you to have the EIN number to open the account. I will tell you that it is much more cumbersome to have to apply for the EIN number and work through the federal government process. So it might be advantageous for you to ask different banks and find out who does not require that as you're opening your account. You have to do entire record keeping and submit it throughout your entire journey as a candidate and following your election process anyhow to Oakland schools. So there is a real tight process in following your financials. So just a tidbit that you may want to know, because that's another layer if you have to get an EIN number. So at that point, is there anyone, if it's easiest if you can like raise your hand or in the chat room ask to be called on, or tell me you have a question and I can call on you, and then all of the board members will jump in and answer as they're able. Any questions? I'm not seeing any hands. Yes, Donald Walker.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I hope everybody is safe and well, especially during this this wonderful COVID-19 season. My question is, if you can answer this, is approximately speaking, how much did you have to raise in order to be successful candidates to the board? And what did that process of getting money look like, or getting funds, I should say, look like?
Mrs. Smith?
Okay, so first I want to also say, which we all forgot to say, is when you file, once you file, you become the public. Everyone knows that you've ran, well, you put your name in. You no longer have a private life. So, with that being said, I personally had some contributions, but my campaign, I want to say roughly was around 8,000, but I spent my own money. You can have fundraisers. I had a couple of fundraisers. Um, you and it's not a secret. I did mine at Brass Point. I know that restaurant. I know them well. They're great friends of mine. So what you want to do is you want to make those friendships and connections with the restaurant that you frequent, or an ice cream parlor or whatever. But you want to do fundraiser. That's the biggest thing you want to do is fundraise. The most important thing that cost me the most were my signs. Um, Miss Weems, if she's still on the line, she was endorsed. So when you get an endorsement, and maybe she could piggyback on what happened with her, I'm not sure. I think Miss Green was endorsed as well. But when you get an endorsement, you have the opportunity to, um, and don't forget, endorsements don't vote. So, but at the end of the day, when you get that endorsement, you have that obligation of picking, do you want your signs paid for or your mail? Things go out. I happen to go, my campaign, I had that little book that you see, and I had my picture in there, but I had a lot of name recognition too. So yeah. So but it can be costly.
Mrs. Williams, did you have something to say?
So I think you raise a really good question. I hope you guys can hear me. How much money you need to fund a campaign is really a personal decision. I can tell you that the more money you raise, if you intend to raise over $1,000, there are some additional filing requirements that you'll have, and you'll need to identify a treasurer, and it becomes more cumbersome. You can run a campaign on less than $1,000 if you choose to do so. There will be less paperwork involved for you. I think it's really a personal choice. It will depend on what you want to do, how much money you're comfortable spending, and how many people are running. That will likely be a factor as well. I can tell you that I raised about $6,000 to $7,000. However much you raise will be public information to the extent that you raise over $1,000 and you're required to have a filing. I think you're saying something, Donald. I'm not sure if you're speaking to it. Okay, you're on mute. Okay. Most of the costs that I had were in mailings. Mailings are extremely expensive. So next to signs, mailings were my most expensive item, followed by signs, and then other just general expenses. Hope you find that helpful.
So what you have to remember too is when you're running for school board, unlike when you're running for city council, you only have, if you're running for Farmington, it's Farmington, or city council, Farmington Mills. When you're in the school board, you're the entire school system. So you've got a little bit of Northville, you've got some West Bloomfield, you have Farmington and Farmington Hills. So Mrs. Williams was absolutely right. The mailings are the most expensive, and they can get several thousand for one mailing. So Donald, what's also might be helpful is, as Mrs. Williams said, there is a record. Everyone who runs has to have what their expenses were and how much they raised and where their contributions came from. That's all part of public disclosure, and you can get that right on the Oakland County Treasurer's website under elections, and that can help you. But it is absolutely, as Mrs. Williams said, it is very variable depending on what you are looking at. Online platforms may be cheaper, but they may be more expensive depending what format you want to use. Signage, if you want t-shirts, buttons, it just, you can go the whole gamut in that sense. So you can have individual contributions as well. Some people will do meet and greets where you do that, but everything has to be logged anytime you receive a contribution. Has to be signed in. So I see both Mrs. Weems and Mrs. Smith. I think Mrs. Weems is first, so I'll go there first.
I just wanted to add one more point. I do know people who have run successful campaigns on much less at the $2,000 range. So it really just depends.
Ms. Angie?
Okay, and also keep in mind too that you don't have to have a campaign manager, but you know, if I had a campaign manager slash treasurer, I didn't handle my own finances, but it depends on how much you want this. I, on the other hand, I learned from the best. I learned from Aldo Vagnosi. For those of you that have been in this community long enough, um, you it most people when they get their mail, the first thing they do is just they take it and they just throw it away. I did door knockers, and when I did my door knockers, I went door to door. You go door to door. Well, with this going on, that's going to be hard. But you go door to door, and there's going to be people that are going to ask questions. They're going to want to know, what do you actually think? What do you, they want to know where you are and what do you stand for. And it's a personal approach. They love that a candidate is taking the time and not being a politician, but going door to door to get to know who you are, what you stand for, and how long you've been in the community. And it's a personal approach. You hand them the brochures and your lit, and then you go on about your way. That's another thing. Your literature, you cannot put it in mailboxes. It is against the law. You cannot. So if you want to go door to door, you cannot open the door. Now, if you got a little box where you get your uh, newspaper, it can go in there. But I got door hangers and I put them on the door. So yeah, you might be chased by a couple of dogs, or water hoses the sprinkler system may go off every now and then. But it's the best thing ever. Get a group of people and it'll work.
I'll also mention, Donald, something else that helps during the as you're out actively campaigning. Some of those endorsements. So, for example, if you got a Democratic or a Republican endorsement, or you got a Michigan School Board Association, those people will often include your literature with theirs and help you with distribution, if that's something that you get. If you don't receive the endorsement, then they're not going to offer that out. But there's a lot of help out there. So I also want to let you know that once you have filed for your candidacy, Dr. Herrera will reach out to you and set up a meeting to meet with you individually, ask any questions you have about our district vision, mission, our strategic plan, our hopes and dreams and where we're going as a district, and answer any questions that you have about our district. Also, you'll be invited as a group to meet our central office team, who will walk you through each component of central office, from curriculum and instruction to equity to finance and facilities, as well as HR. So they'll give you more information during that time. And then Mrs. Baumann is excellent at getting you a district packet of information about pretty much everything that's happening in our district. And it's a wealth of information that you'll be able to get as well. So you're going to get a lot of information. You're also going to be invited to partake in a lot of different forums. The League of Women Voters would invite you to come in. They host a night where the candidates are asked questions and get to respond. There's a lot of those. The newspapers will reach out, interview you, ask you what your platform is, what things you would hope to accomplish if you were elected. So you're going to get a lot of opportunity to really share what your thoughts and feelings are, as well as learn more and more about our district. I just received a question here. It says, are you allowed to be on the board and also be on the board on parent groups in the district at the same time? Does anyone want to answer that, Mrs. Smith?
Okay, so that can be a tough one. What happens is, as board members, what can happen is, and so many of us, a few of us have, few of you have children on the board, well, that are parents on the board. I don't happen to have any. I don't agree with, and I'm just going to say it with how Mashpee looks at it, because you may be a single parent and you want to be involved, but they would advise you to, if you're on the school board, it can look like a conflict of interest if you're still on a board of any sort. And even as if your child plays on a sport, you don't want to be um, that one that does the scorekeeping, and you're a school board member, and the other team finds out that you're on the board and you called the wrong play. The first thing is, well, that was a school board member. You shouldn't be a treasurer or hold and touch any of those funds if you're on the school board. Um, we've been also advised, we have also been advised over the years that I've been on the board, that if you have if there's a spouse involved, whereas in my case there's not, and you go to parent teachers conference, some teachers will get kind of intimidated, and you want to talk and show other students grades. So if you've got a spouse, you may want to send that spouse, because those teachers get kind of intimidated because they think that you're their boss too. So I would say, following from Michigan School Board, it's not in the best interest to be still on the board. But I do know that, like Ms. Weems and myself have both been actively involved in FAPM, and Ms. Weems is still involved heavily with our PTA, which makes sense because you work together. But as far as holding the office, no, you can't hold both.
Mrs. Weems?
So I would like to just add to what Mrs. Smith said, Angie. I agree with what she said. I will also add, though, that there is no law that prevents you from participating in any other event. However, the Michigan Association of School Boards does recommend that you refrain from certain types of activities that may create the appearance of a conflict of interest, or which might put you in a situation where you might be, which just might put you in a bad situation. Angie gave a couple of examples. In general, we tend to shy away from any positions that involve funding. Just again, would like to just stay away from that, just in the event anything, might happen. I was president of the Dunkel PTA at the time that I became a member of the Board of Education. I resigned that position because I felt that there could be some conflicts of interest. There may be instances where, as the president of the PTA, my views might conflict with that of the board, and because I am a board member and I've assumed the oath of office for the board, my interests are with all students across the Farmington Hills, the Farmington Public Schools, not just with respect to one school or one organization. So that's kind of the reason why I thought it was appropriate to resign, because I didn't want to give the appearance that my allegiance was with one school. It should be with all. Now, I'm still very active with the PTA. I'm still very active with FAPN and other organizations, because those are still passions and areas of concern of mine. But I do try to maintain that appropriate distance.
Mr. Mokumal?
Yeah, I just want to add that, as I mentioned in my presentation, really being on the Board of Education kind of trumps all of these other areas of interest. And I just think it's important to keep in mind that the community, people see you as a board member, whether you like it or not. It's like you have this big neon sign behind you that you can't see, but everybody else can see. And so it's really important to keep that in mind, that we have to think about all 9,400 students, think about the big picture, and really, honestly, this takes enough time that, you probably aren't going to have a lot of time to volunteer with some of these other things.
Mr. Walker again here, and then we'll go to Mrs. Heinrich.
Yes. You mentioned that there was a 4-year and a 6-year term to those who win the seat. Can a person still hold the seat if within either one of those terms, say something happens with their job situation and they end up moving out of the district to another city, but still in close enough proximity to still be able to do the work or be able to demonstrate that they do the work? Would they have to give up that seat if they moved out of the district, or can they maintain that seat after they move out of the district?
Mrs. Weems?
I believe that the rule is that you must be a resident in one of the areas, that the Farmington Public Schools District serves. So if you move out of the district, then you should resign your position and someone else would be appointed to serve out the rest of that term.
And that's correct. So the 3 positions that we have right now, 2 are 6-year terms and 1 is a 4-year term. So when you go down to the county to file your paperwork, you have to tell them which one you're going to apply for, because that's how they put it on the ballot, is that you're running for one, either the 6-year term or the 4-year term positions. And Mrs. Weems is actually, she shared accurate information with that, yes, if you are not living within, you have to resign your position, and then it goes to an appointment. You have to live within the school district that you are servicing. Mrs. Heinrich. We can't hear you,
Yes.
Mrs. Heinrich. There you go.
Oh, can you hear me now? All right. I thought in the past it was the terms went by the highest number of vote getters. So is the term 4-year, 6-year, is that always been true?
So the board several years ago revised, and Mrs. Smith might be better at answering this. I believe they went from 2-year terms to 4-year terms to 6-year terms.
Oh, okay.
And the intent was to stagger so that you didn't lose your whole board at the same time. And
Okay.
so the intent is to stagger, but they do not do it by number of votes. It does not determine. You have to identify, are you going for a 4-year term or a 6-year term? And
Okay.
I see, yeah, let me let Mr. Muckamall respond here to you real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, just to let you know, so when you file the first form, you have to indicate whether you're going for a full term or a partial term.
So 4-year is a partial term? That's considered a partial term rather than a full
Yes.
term?
Yeah, full term is 6 years.
So let me just clarify, Claudia, let me just tell you. So what happened was we had a board member who resigned, and
Okay.
then we did an appointment. And then what happens is when the election year comes up, that appointment has to then run for that seat. They don't get to fulfill that appointment for the rest of the term. That's why we have a 4-year term up, because all of
Okay.
our board seats as a whole are now 6-year terms. But you can see what happens when somebody resigns, then it leaves that at a different number of years.
Oh, okay. So, and then the other question I had, because you're having, I mean, the world seems to be on hold right now where it's changed, it's a different world. And you're having the information meeting and you gave the deadlines for filing, but is this something that should be done soon, like this month, next month? And because the election is in November, and then when do the new members take office? Do they take right after election, or is there a gap?
Good
Well,
question.
I guess those were 2 questions.
I can answer those unless somebody else wants to answer. Anybody? Mrs. Weems?
I'm sorry, your question was, when is the deadline? I believe it's in July.
No, I knew the deadline, but you're having the informational meeting now. I mean, this is May, so is it a good idea if you're interested to put the wheels in motion right away, rather than wait till the deadline? And then the second question is, the election is in November. And so when would the school new members take office? Would it be in November? Would they wait
new-
till January?
New board members start in January, so the
Okay.
term will end in December, and the new board members
Okay.
take their seats in January, get sworn.
Okay.
I believe it's the first meeting in January.
Correct.
When you file is a matter of personal preference. You can file anytime between now and July. Some people prefer to wait because they're still on the fence, or perhaps they'd like to see, what the other candidate pool looks like before they make their decision. There are a variety of reasons why some people do it earlier rather than later.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just add in too, and then you've got others that want to get a jump start. So as soon as you file and you've either paid your fee to file or you've secured the signatures required and returned that, at that point, once you have that paper confirming that, you're able to begin your campaign, forming all of those components of that if you're interested. Angie?
I like doing, and this is just a personal thing for me. It's in my case, I like to do it early on because in the summertime, that gives you enough time to well, now you can't, but before you were able to go down to your farmer's market and walk around and with your shirts or what have you and get to know people. And it's networking. You had the opportunity to, do the things in the summertime. So, and it's just getting that name recognition out there. And I mean, I'm not saying buy your signs right away, but you want to be able to have the name recognition and let people see you, and especially in the summertime. And it's going to be hard this year for any candidate to run. I mean, I wish all of you the luck that are running. I'm sorry. But I think that it would be in the best interest that if you file now, then you get your name out there and then you can have your events. So, yeah.
So also, so what happens once you have officially filed and returned and you've got the Oakland County Election Board sends your name back to the district and says you are an actual candidate for a seat on the Board of Education. You can start fundraising at that point, organizing. I will caution you that because it's an election year, the places that print materials and things start to get bogged down. So it does, getting your signs manufactured, picked up, or your mailers or flyers, it takes time. So that's, it depending on how much of a vigorous campaign you're looking at running, can also play into how quickly you want to file and get moving. Any other questions that we can answer for anyone? Please know that we're here. Our goal in organizing tonight was, we know it can be a daunting task and we want to be as helpful as possible through it. And if you have questions or concerns, please reach out to us and we'll certainly share the best of our ability, any of our expertise or learnings to help support you in this endeavor. Because as we all know, the bottom line is the kids in our district and our staff that are committed to working here each day. So thank you so much. To any board members who have anything else they want to add? Okay. On that, we wish you a wonderful evening and please stay well. And again, thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.